So the main three facts that we're going to talk about with a multi-cloud, multi-CDN solution at this time is uptime and ways you can use DNS to actually increase your uptime when you're a multi-CDN or a multi-cloud solution. Performance, right? How can you then start using monitoring systems and a monitoring company that also manages your traffic, such as Constellix, right? To actually manage multiple clouds and route traffic based upon which cloud provider is currently the fastest for you. And there's many different ways of doing that. And we'll just talk about them for a little bit. And then we're going to talk about some cool things that we're working on. This one I'm just going to hit on real quickly about some near future stuff we're working on with analytics, query anomaly detection, query anomalies, and some really great stuff we're working on inside of our R&D group here in our another sister company that we have that's associated with us. So the first part is uptime, right? Now with uptime, you're looking at, you have your hosted CDN and you're with a cloud provider. Let's say it's Amazon and Amazon's currently down, right? But they're your CDN, right? You're using the cloud front and everything's down and you got to move the traffic over somewhere else. And you know, the solutions before used to be, well, you know, if you're going to use a CDN provider, you got to use their DNS. You want to put everything, you want to put all your eggs in one basket and you want to keep it all safe and secure. And so they won't go down. We're showing over and over again, and it's been the same for the past 17 years, and at least in the 20 years I've been in the industry, every provider has these downtime. So you want to prevent these outages, right? And so the basic way that we have it is failover, right? And you can failover with round robin, you can do quad A name, C name. We had a good webinar last month or a little month ago that talked about the A name records and how that can be used inside CDNs. And so what we want to do is we want to monitor the performance of our CDNs, right? And just base it upon the up and down times of them and then make decisions on those records. So you can see over here, I have a couple of screenshots, one showing our sonar monitoring applications where we're actually monitoring a solution. And I'm actually going to bring this up in our demo and walk through the different configurations that you can do inside of a DNS environment. And then I'm also going to, and then we're going to talk about the monitoring, and then I'm going to talk about how you can actually put that into your DNS rules and say, okay, I now want to make decisions based upon which DNS providers up or down. You can keep a round robin, right? You can keep that traffic going between all of them, and then as one goes down, one's dropped. Or you can keep it so that when you have a primary one, if the primary one goes down, it goes to the secondary one, right? So that's sort of uptime, and that will fix generally, you know, 95% of people's problems, right? Because most people are using a CDN. One CDN provider generally is good enough for most people. It's fast enough. You know, they're going to have some slow and some headaches every so often, but overall, if that provider goes down, all you guys don't want to deal with those issues, right? You want to make it so that it's an easy solution. You can move off it. You know automatically your traffic's going to be going somewhere else. So the next time Amazon has an outage or Cloudflare has an outage or anything like that, you guys can rest well knowing your traffic's not going to be down more than for a couple minutes, right? And that's kind of where the Constellix basic DNS failover services were designed, was to fix those sort of issues, right? And then from there, it starts going more now. So now that once you start having multiple clouds, right, and you start having these other issues, what can you do to actually increase this performance, right? And what can you do to actually say, okay, I now have cloud provider A and cloud provider B and cloud provider C. Why don't I just use the fastest one overall? Why don't I use the fastest one in a particular region? Or why don't I use the fastest one based upon what my users are telling me based upon their end user data, right? And so we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to show you a little bit about that in our interfaces. And these are kind of two of the screen captures I showed you here. You can see the one on the left, we actually have, you see 3 different cloud providers. I see Amazon, I see Key CDN, and I believe the top one looks to be a StackPath FQDN. And you can tell how StackPath is having a faster response time in this region, so why not direct the traffic to the fastest one, right? If you have all 3, you're only paying on usage, it doesn't really cost any more, it's only paying on usage, so why not send the traffic to the fastest one? On the solution to the right, it shows you a little bit about some of our internal RUM, ITO. RUM stands for Real User Monitoring, and ITO is our Internet Traffic Optimization. So here now we're basing the decisions based upon the real user measurements and real user monitoring of your end users. So how this is done is you can put you can put JavaScript inside of your web pages. We automatically will be monitoring this stuff all the time based upon our synthetic checks, as you see on the left. But at the same point now, we're going to figure out which network from what region is going to be faster for all individual users. So this is where I tell people, you know, if you're on a Sprint cell phone in a state or in a particular region, and if that's faster to go to this CDN provider than it is to go over Verizon cell phone, why wouldn't you use one provider over the other? Why are you directing someone that's faster on Sprint to go to a slower network, right? You send them to the most fastest network you can based upon all the measurements that you have. And then you can take all these measurements that are provided to you, and you can hold your CDN companies accountable, right? Some of these CDN companies that a lot of the IT shops actually have contracts for, you have these huge SLAs, but they also have performance guarantees. And if you have the true factual data and say, hey, here's the true factual data, users in this region from this network were having issues in latency. You know, you guys have to, you could usually what we found is that when we provide that data to our users, they're actually getting that savings back. You're actually saving money on that. You're holding your CDN providers accountable. And you're actually saving money once you have all the data that you need, just by holding certain companies accountable. So what I want to do real quickly is I have the next poll out, and the next poll is going to talk about if you have or have not moved. And we're going to talk a little bit about how this is done inside the Constellix platform, or how it could be done, and we're going to talk about the difficulties of doing some of these solutions. But if you have moved, then what were the big limitations you did in setting up a multi-cloud infrastructure? And if you have not, what are some of the big difficulties you had? You know, did you think it was impossible? Do you think it was too difficult? Do you think it was too expensive? Or do you think it was expensive and difficult, right? And that's really what I want to try to figure out over here. Because understanding this will kind of understand, and we can, all these can be demiffed, right? It's definitely not impossible. I think everybody knows that. I don't see many responses in that. Can it be too difficult? It could be, but you're architecting a solution for the cloud anyway, right? I know I have a lot of friends that worked in the business as well, and they work for IT companies, and they fully rebuilt their whole entire development to work with one cloud provider, right? And I'm scratching my bald head trying to figure out, like, why would you do that? Why would you rebuild everything just to work with one cloud provider when you could build it to make it more general for both cloud providers? And so let's just take a look at the poll over here and try to figure this out. Okay, so let me see. I'm gonna share these results. I don't like hiding anything. So, okay, no one thought it was impossible. That's good. Hopefully the first, how long have we been talking so far? The first 20 minutes have indicated it's not impossible. You kind of tell a whole understanding of why we're even talking about this. And it's obviously not too difficult. It's not impossible. We know that. So is it too difficult? It could be, right? So a lot of the ideas of talking about multi-cloud comes about, okay, which part of you putting into the cloud, right? Probably the more simpler ones is CDN, right? So CDN, I'm gonna show you how you can set it up in about 4 or 5 minutes, right inside Constellix. Now the too expensive myth, that's actually kind of interesting. So most cloud providers, right, unless you're one of the most expensive ones, of course, is Amazon, as everyone knows. But if you talk about the cloud providers, right, you're only paying based on usage, right? And so if you said, okay, I'm going to split my usage across 2 different cloud providers, generally your in and outs are going to be split in half. You're not really increasing your cost that much, right? It's kind of a myth where you go multiple cloud, you're going to be increasing your costs, especially if you have a lot of bandwidth going in and out of different solutions, right? So expensive and difficult, you can kind of say, okay, that's putting it all into one, right? It's going to take too much work and it's going to be too expensive. I hope I could try to convince you guys that it's not too expensive to go multi-cloud. And the research shows, and if you look at it, talked to a lot of our clients that have used us, and I've talked to a lot of them as they've implemented it, they've actually lowered their cost, right? And so a good example would be that one company would say, okay, you know what, I'm going to choose different companies regionally based upon their performance. And I'm going to say, okay, I know I have this really great CDN that's based in the Asia Pacific region, right? Which I know has really great connectivity to the eyeball networks in that region. That's going to help out, Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, Hong Kong, going in parts of China, and of another provider just for China. Well, you could turn up these different CDNs, right, for everyone you want, and then you can let another service such as Constellix make the decisions to actually route traffic to the fastest provider. And then at the same point, you can have your global providers everywhere else in Europe, North America. You can use, the Google Cloud services, the Microsoft Azure services, the Amazon services. You can use Cloudflare. You can put them all everywhere else, and knowing that they're not as strong in those particular regions, and you can get a really fast, that's region specific, like a good Chinese CDN is going to outperform anyone that's global, and you can actually achieve those goals. So when you're doing that, you're generally also getting a better price point too, right? Because you're going to choose someone that specializes in a certain market. You're only paying based on usage, and you can actually determine that by choosing a more specific, service in a particular region, you're going to get a better price point. So for instance, there's several CDNs out there that only specialize in a certain market, and to compete, they know they have to offer a lower price point than the big global providers. So they have a better performance in that region than a global provider would, but they're not going to have the same global performance, but you only use them where they're actually benefiting you. And we actually have some features inside of Constellix as well, which are called, you could do pricing handicaps or performance handicaps, where you can actually determine to say, I only want to use a certain provider if they're so much, better performing, because they could be a more expensive provider at the same point. And you can say, okay, this provider is a lot cheaper. I prefer to use them unless it's, significantly slower than the next guy.